A Dutiful Spouse. I thought this was really interesting to have it essentially be a version of a silent film where there's, very little, if any, dialogue. There might be a tiny bit in the very beginning, but you have this crazy interaction between the two of them where she is taking care of him and helping him take his medicine and then absolutely turns around and kills him and then buries him, and then he comes back in and she like cleans him off. I think it's just such a fascinating interaction between the two of them, and the fact that he comes in and he's not mad or anything leads to more questions than anything else of like, what was the pill that he took? Clearly he wasn't doing great beforehand because he had like trouble even sitting up by himself and she was helping him. And at first I attributed that to just like him being half asleep, but then after you get to the end, I was like, well, maybe it was more than that. And somehow by giving him this pill, killing him, and then burying him, it was like a reset of some kind, which could just be my crazy mind trying to come up with some kind of justification for why he walked back in to the house relatively chill, that she had just done this and just sat down and like had this great little moment where she like brushes off some dirt from his like his shoulder or something like that. It just led to a lot of questions, which I loved because it's like I'm so invested in wanting to know more and wanting more information that, like, is this just a part of their marriage? Like, is this something that she does to keep him around for longer ultimately and give him a higher quality of life, maybe? I'm fascinating. And now I'm super curious of, what does all of that actually mean? And if it is something like that, where to improve his quality of life, at some point she actually needs to kill him and bury him. Would that be something that I could do as the wife in that situation? Knowing that ultimately it's better in the long run, but to do it in that actual moment, could I do that for the long-term win? It's just a really interesting question. And so that's kind of where my mind went of, hypothetically speaking, if that was a necessary part of his long-term quality of life, health, whatever, could that be something that a wife could do? And that's just kind of where my mind went after getting to the end of it. And I think it's a really, really fascinating question and not one that I have an answer to. But I really enjoyed it.
In the film A Dutiful Spouse, the wife appears to kill her husband and then buries him in the backyard, but then he comes back to the house alive and she just dusts him off. I think it's kind of a hyperbolic example of a relationship that's been going through a fight or a rough patch and then recovers like nothing ever happened. I really liked the black and white choice and the completely silent nature of this film. It gives a very eerie vibe, and overall, I think the point was executed very well.
Beautiful spouse. So in this short, it's really interesting how it was shot, purposely avoiding actually showing the wife. So all you're seeing is her action, being dutiful. She's taking care of a clearly sick husband. She's clearly a caretaker. And then at some point, she takes it upon herself to take him out of his misery. And that's very much of a hot topic when you're dealing with people who are like in a hospice or very terminally ill. Is it cruel to keep them going for your own sake? Or is it the most dutiful thing as a spouse to provide them that peace and rest? And so everyone's on very different, varying ends of the spectrum in terms of what they feel about that, like the pull the plug or the not pull the plug issue. What's interesting about this, though, is that, clearly she is on the side of put him out of his misery, or maybe put herself out of her misery. It's really hard to tell. You never really see her expression, but it can kind of go either way. She could be doing this out of love. She could be doing this out of fatigue. Regardless, she suffocates him, buries him. Which that part, though, makes me think, is this out of love? Because would you bury him? If it's just, would you bury him? But she buries him herself in the backyard, and then he reappears. And it gives me the ending gives me a sense that this has been a cycle. This is just something that they do. The deeper meaning behind it all, I'm not 100% sure, but I did think it was a really interesting concept for a short. It was succinct, and it gave me a really large sense of this relationship as a whole, which I think was the purpose.
This film is called A Dutiful Spouse. This was such a well-done, creepy short from the US. What struck me about this film was its excellent use of sound. All the sound effects were heightened, especially the door slamming and the shovel digging in the ground. Very eerie. It was brilliant to set this in black and white, much like an old Hitchcock thriller. The music added to the suspense with the pulsing and the high-pitched screeches with deep minor notes below. The performers were quiet and subtle. Great work. I also really loved the plot twist at the end. Well done. A Dutiful Spouse. Check it out.